my
Sure.
rabbi also in Gainesville came from a constructionist, okay?
Was that a
He
conservative?
was a cat rabbi.
He was.
And so he then left.
Yeah.
Because
He found another way to serve the community.
Yes, he
Yes.
did.
Okay.
Conservative?
It's a metaphor I used earlier.
It was a whole other thing he did before.
Was that a conservative synagogue?
Well, the conservative
Right.
yeah.
Oh, they, oh,
That's
it's,
the whole
I'm still
community
with
once upon a time, so
Right.
that was all there was.
Reconstruction still, yes.
It's conservative, yeah.
All right. So chapter 7, 8, but we need a quick recap. So that means you're going to be looking at a page that says Introduction. The first line of Mishnah 8 introduces the laws concerning guardians. Oh, we need extra copies. Is there an extra one there that we can send down to Laura? Okay, so we have been talking in the last section about workers and employers' rights, obligations, and we had just finished up the section talking about when you are working in someone's field, what you get to eat. Right? You're working among the grapes, and you eat a grape while you're a hired laborer. That's okay, says the Torah. That's okay, says the Mishnah. But now we're moving into a slightly different category of not a worker in the field, but what about the guard of the field, right? The security guard. He's standing there. There's a bunch of people working, eating grapes and picking grapes for the owner. What does he get? And that's what we're going to pick up. And that's going to make, is there someone at the door?
Yes, we're hearing.
Well then by all means, let them in.
2 seats together. We'll see how that works. Whichever they want.
I think all of my copies are out, so we may end up having to share some of the translations. I wasn't expecting a bumper crowd.
No.
It's nice.
Isn't it though? That's a good problem to have.
So we're gonna see the way the Mishnah, much like our own conversation, has quick digressions because somebody mentioned something, and that's going to happen as soon as we get through our discussion of the guardian. Who here was around when we first began Bava Metzia way back when? Which was months ago now, right? And you may remember the talking about guardians and borrowers and paid guardians and unpaid right? We're going to be coming back to that. You guys had a lot of questions about it, and some of them we answered at the time. We're going to answer a lot more now, and I hope you'll see that it's very practical, and also give you a better feel for how the Mishnah works, which is it has ideas and then it comes back to them. It circles round and round topics. We have an extra copy there for them.
This is on 8, right?
Right, where it says Mishnah 8. Big bold letters in the near the top of the page. All right. Harry, would you mind reading for us?
Okay. Mishnah 8.
Had to twist your arm, I know.
First point is, those that guard, that is gathered produce, may eat from it because that is the custom of the land and not because that is the law of Torah.
All right. So we were just talking about, that was just Natan telling us that he's not going to be here tonight. Okay. But we got a full class anyway, so we'll do. So you're guarding, it's by implication gathered produce, because if you're guarding it, you're not actually out gathering it. So it has to be what you're guarding after the gather. So imagine you are the guy who was hired to guard the grain after it's all been pulled in. So you're standing there next to the giant bushels of grain that are getting ready for the threshing. Looks tasty, doesn't it? All that fresh wheat. And if you've never eaten like fresh, kernels, it's actually really, they are very tasty. Well, how do you think we, started eating wheat? We didn't eat wheat by someone giving us a loaf of bread. We ate wheat by eating the grasses and went, wow, this is actually nice. And then someone figured out you could grind it, and then you could make flour, and you could water and baking and all that. So that eating raw grain is actually quite tasty. So you got this guard. He's sitting there next to this giant pile of nice food. The Torah says if you're a worker, you get to eat what you are harvesting. Doesn't say anything about being a guardian, getting to eat it. But the Mishnah says, even though the Torah doesn't give you permission, local custom does. And that means if you're the boss and you walk by and you see your guardian eating a bit of the grain, you can't be angry. You can't chastise him because he's just doing what the local custom says is permissible. And that local custom doesn't contradict Torah law. In this case, it's simply giving a little bit more license. It's being more generous than the Torah itself had been. And the boss is not allowed to be upset with that. What do we think about this? So it's important to make sure we get that distinction, right? The custom isn't saying break Torah law. The custom is saying the boss can be more generous. It's okay.
So two people in the warehouse, two
guards,
two different farmers,
right?
The owners say that's no longer the custom. They enforce it, and
so
they're making their own law.
All right. So when we come back to the question of then how do you change custom? So many customs never change because nobody is allowed to actually act against custom long enough to establish a new custom. So in this particular case, you have an issue where even today, if you were guarding someone's grain, you would be allowed to eat it. It doesn't matter what any local policy has been. The custom was established as established for all of Israel for all time. So it does elevate it to a point where in modern parlance, we would call that a law. But the Mishnah is always very careful to try and spell out, this is what we do, and this is why we do it. And sometimes this is what we do is because the Torah commanded it, and sometimes this is what we do is because this is what custom has become. Sometimes it's what the rabbis have demanded, the sages. For many people, they don't care about that. They only care, what do I have to do? But the Mishnah and the rabbis were very, very careful to always show you what was from Torah, what was from them, and what was from custom. Because they wanted people to know all of the underpinnings of the law, because it's through the law that we come to understand ourselves, and God, Torah, and everything better. And you don't get that just by memorizing the conclusion of what you do. You have to know the whys. So they are, at the risk of undermining their own authority, telling you this is custom, but this is what we do.
I gather he can only eat as much as to satisfy his own needs. He can't take some home.
Exactly right. Yes, exactly. And that was covered when we talked about the worker in the previous couple sections, where the worker as well isn't allowed to stuff his own bags. He's not taking home, 400 pounds for his family. It's just his own hunger at the moment.
And where does that stop?
His own hunger at the moment?
Yeah.
It doesn't.
So he could eat the whole pile.
He could. And in the previous Mishnah, the rabbis dealt with that. And they said, technically you are allowed to. But if you get a reputation as a glutton, who's going to hire you next time?
That's true.
Right? So that's a nice way of showing that sometimes there are social repercussions to even doing something you are permitted that will make you think twice about how you do it. Right? So the Torah gave you permission to pig out on the grapes. But if the farmer comes back and finds that you've eaten 90% of the grapes, he may not be able to take you to court. He may not be able to prosecute you because you just did what the Torah gave you permission to do, but he certainly doesn't have to hire you again next season. And none of the other farmers are going to hire you either.
And the rabbis would not defend him?
No. I mean, the rabbis would say he did nothing wrong against Torah, but he was an idiot.
Yeah. But practically speaking, the third week you're standing with this grain and stuff, you don't want to see it anymore. Because you're eating it.
Given the levels of nutrition in the ancient world, you probably still would. Food was food, and it didn't matter how picky you felt, you ate. All right, so now that we have reintroduced our character of a guardian, we are going to go back and go into some more detail on the topic of what it means to be watching over someone else's stuff. And to do that, we do a quick recap.
Number 2, there are 4 kinds of guardians: an unpaid guardian, a borrower, a paid guardian, and a hirer.
All right, so before we get into their responsibilities, I want to make sure we get that definition, because this goes all the way back to chapter 3, which was months ago. Feels like months ago, at least. So the difference between these categories, obviously, paying makes a difference. A guardian is somebody who has been tasked with watching the item but doesn't get to use it, doesn't get to benefit from it. Right? So if I hand you my my car, right, like a valet, right, and I'm paying him to park my car and watch my car, he doesn't get to go joyriding. Not supposed to, right? He parks my car and it sits there in the garage, and then when I come out, he gives it back to me. That would be a paid guardian. An unpaid guardian would be if you ask your friend to watch your car while you're on vacation, right? You're not going to pay him for it. He also doesn't get to use it while you're on vacation, but he's keeping an eye on it, and there was an agreement that he would keep an eye on it. He's not being paid, he's not using it, but he is supposed to be watching it. A borrower, that's somebody who gets to use it, and they don't have to pay you for it, right? That's like the best deal possible, right? I get to use your car, and I don't even have to pay. And then a hirer, a renter, that's somebody who gets to use it, but they had to pay you for it. So we got our 4 categories. Good, because each category has a different type of responsibility, a different liability if something goes wrong with the object. All right, so part A.
Part A, an unpaid guardian may take an oath that he had not been neglectful in every case of loss or damage and be free of liability.
All right, so it's nice that this translation gives the brackets to help us with this translation. But what it's saying is, if you are the friend who's watching your car while you're on vacation, basically, if you come back and the car's gone, all he has to say is, I swear I didn't take it. And if he says that, you're good. You can't take him to court and sue him for the loss of the car. You can't do anything as long as he's willing to take an oath. And remember, oaths are serious matters. Right? You're actually talking about God and everything. It's not just, I promise. It really counts. Because I didn't use it and I wasn't getting paid for it, my liability is that much. But B,
a borrower must make restitution in every case.
On the opposite end of the spectrum, right? This is the person who uses my car but didn't pay me a dime for it. They have 100% liability. Right? So I borrow your car, and while I'm out, someone steals it. I'm getting you a new car. I borrow your car and I'm out and a meteor hits it. I'm getting you a new car. I'm out, I borrowed your car and something goes wrong with the engine and the car is totaled. I'm getting you a new car, right? A borrower, because you are at 0% cost to you and 100% utility, you have 100% responsibility, right? So this is all derived from the verses in the Torah, which talk about borrowers, hirers, guardians, and everything. So the rabbis are simply making clear what the Torah lays out. Good? Good. And then we have the middle category.
A paid guardian or a hirer may take an oath if the beast was injured or taken captive or dead, but he must make restitution if it was lost or stolen.
All right. Now, that exact category of when does it die or when is it lost or stolen, how does this work? We're going to get into that in the next section of the Mishnah. But if you are paid to watch, like a shepherd or a valet, right? You don't get to use it, but you're paid to watch it. Or you've paid to use it, so you're getting the utility, but you paid for it, then you're at the same level of responsibility because you're both half benefiting and not benefiting. One benefits by using it, the other benefits by getting paid for it. And that means that they have responsibility for things that should be under their control, right? So if I park my car in that lovely downtown garage and it gets stolen, I don't care what they put up on that wall where it says not responsible for stolen blah, blah. No, you're responsible. Jewish law. Don't try and use this in American civil law. But according to Jewish law, they're responsible. I put it into your care and I paid you to watch it. And if you were negligent enough to fail to do the job for which I paid you, you're on the hook. And likewise, if you rented the car, because you're deriving benefit from it, you now have more responsibility than an unpaid person who might be using it or watching it. Make sense? Okay. Now let's talk about what does it actually mean. If we go to Mishnah 9, the next page, the little preamble, the most common things that would be borrowed or guarded on behalf of another person would be animals. Think shepherds. Right? Shepherds were not always watching their own flocks, and shepherd was often a hired position, a paid guardian position. You would pay me to watch your sheep. And that was my job. I was a sheep watchman. And
Because I was on vacation, so.
No, no, it's my job, right? So let's imagine you've got 100 head of sheep, or whatever they count sheep by, and you want them taken up to pasture in the high hills. But you don't want to go up in the high hills for a month. You've got other things to do. So you hire me to take the sheep up into the hills and bring them back in a month when they're nice and fat off all that grass.
Okay.
So that was a shepherd's job in the ancient world. It's not like looking after your sheep because you're on vacation. It's, I'm going to go raise those sheep and help them be healthy up in the hills, and then I'll bring them back to you fat and happy and lambs and all that good stuff. So, and because the shepherd often did his job out of sight of the owner, that created tensions of, well, how do I know the guy didn't just take the sheep and eat it? Or how do I know the guy didn't take the sheep and sell it? And that's what is going to be sort of a little bit laid out in this Mishnah. Okay, but first we have to deal with the normal cases.
If one wolf attacked the flock that he was watching, it does not count as an unavoidable accident for which no blame is placed on the guardian.
All right, so I'm a paid shepherd, right? I've got a salary, and a wolf comes in to eat one of the sheep. My job is to stop the wolf.
It's one wolf.
Yeah, it's just one.
Just one. Oh, it's only one.
It's just one wolf. I know you're all looking at me like, it's a wolf. Yeah, but I'm a shepherd, right? And forget what you've seen from medieval manuscripts about, little shepherd boys with little... Shepherds were buff, right? These were the Rambo of the ancient world, and they were out there with those sticks, and they were expected to whack those wolves and send them running. And one wolf, a shepherd should be able to handle one wolf. A couple sling stones, bam, you got it. Right? That's your job. Well, imagine, modern equivalent. Imagine some cowboys out there, and he's sitting there on his horse with his pistol and his rifles, and a wolf comes in to the herd. Oh no, a wolf, what will I do? You shoot the thing, right? That's why you're there. That's your job. The shepherd's job was to fight off a wolf. But
two wolves do count as an unavoidable accident.
once the wolves are ganging up on you, you can't expect the shepherd to be able to stop two wolves at once. Two wolves at once.
There were two shepherds.
If there were two shepherds, then each one of them could handle one wolf. Exactly right. And if you have 15 shepherds, you can handle all the wolves in the world. But the idea being that there was a limit to what you could expect a hired professional to handle and still say they were competent, or if they failed, they were negligent. And in this case, we draw the line at one wolf, right? That's why you have a shepherd. Otherwise, just send the sheep up in the pasture by themselves. What's that? I know. A lone wolf, exactly. So a lone wolf, one shepherd should be able to handle that, no problem. And if he doesn't, then he's going to have to pay for the lost sheep, the dead sheep. Because he should have been able to stop it. And if he couldn't stop it, or was afraid to stop it, or didn't have the skill to stop it, he had no business taking the money to be a shepherd in the first place. Because he got paid for the job, he has to do the job. So remember, as I said at the beginning, not tonight, but when we began the section, there are employer rights and there are employee rights. Both sides have responsibilities in these arrangements. And the employee right is, or the employee responsibility is, one wolf. So all I'm asking, take care of one wolf. Two wolves, I'm not expecting you to handle both of them. They can come from two angles. One's attacking one side of the flock, the other's attacking the other side of the flock. You can't be in two places at once. Yeah, I understand.
Wow.
However,
Rabbi Judah says, in a time where wolves are commonly attacking the settlements, even one wolf is considered to be an unavoidable accident.
right, if the wolves are coming into the settlements, they aren't just up in the hills, but they're actually coming down and stealing animals and raiding, then now we've got a stream of wolves. And you can't expect every shepherd to be able to catch every wolf that's being so bold and so aggressive. So even in those circumstances where it's just one wolf, there are too many wolves cumulatively for us to put him on the hook for one wolf, even if it was an individual that one moment. Sound fair? All right, so the whole idea here is trying to find a fair understanding that both shepherd and sheep owner will both know in advance, they will both be bound by Mishnah, they both be bound by Torah, so that when they come to the court, the Beit Din's decision will be understood and agreed by everybody. Or even better, they won't go to court because they each know which way the decision will go. And so you can keep things out of the court. And that was always the ultimate goal.
2 dogs do not count as an unavoidable accident.
All right, dogs just got degraded, right? 1 wolf, right? I'm sorry, 2 wolves are unavoidable accident. 2 dogs are not. Why? Dogs aren't as mean as wolves.
You don't know my dog.
Or maybe you don't know wolves. So the idea being here that a shepherd, and again, we're not talking about little wimpy, guys in medieval pictures with little cloaks and looking meek and humility and all of that. We're talking tough, burly men that are able to whack 1 wolf, no problem. They should be able to handle 2 dogs, no problem too. Right?
Regardless of size.
Well, they didn't know about mastiffs and wolfhounds and Great Danes and all of that. Those breeds had not been invented yet. So the dogs they knew were sort of standard generic mutt.
Either way, it was smaller than wolves.
Much smaller than a wolf, exactly. And you should be able to handle a couple of dogs if you're a shepherd. However,
Yadu what the Babylonian said in the name of Rabbi Meir, he says, if 2 dogs came from one direction, they do not count as an unavoidable accident. But if they came from 2 directions, they count as an unavoidable accident.
so he's going to cut a little slack and say, well, okay, yeah, if the 2 dogs are coming at you from the same place, you got a couple dogs running into the flock, and you go over there and it's whack, whack with your stick, they go running with tail between the legs, no problem. Or one good rock will hit one and the other will run off afraid, no problem. But if one's over there on that side of the flock and one's over there on that side of the flock, and remember, flocks could be 100 yards across, so it's not just, 10 sheep. You can't be expected to stop this one before that one kills a sheep. And therefore, we can't hold the shepherd reliable or responsible for that loss, no liability.
This is somewhat analogous to what Rabbi Judah said with the wolves coming when they,
when it's a
attack
constant,
settlements routinely.
right, when it's a routine attack on the settlements, exactly. So both Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir here are putting extenuating circumstances. And that's a very important feature that gets picked up in the Talmud, and then, of course, picked up in later Jewish law, which is, this is the basic law, but there can be extenuating circumstances. So, as David said, what about, dogs now that an Irish wolfhound? Well, there's a reason they made Irish wolfhounds so big. It's so they could fight wolves. So by extension, fighting an Irish wolfhound, even though it's in the, biologically it's a dog, it's as bad as a wolf, which would mean that it would fall in the wolf category. And that's where we have to use reasoning and logic to continue to apply this as the world changes and we breed new dogs. Similarly, if there were 13 Chihuahuas, the shepherd should be able to handle that. That shouldn't be, there were 13 of them. Yeah. You could have been able to hit 5 at one smack. And they probably would have been afraid of the sheep anyway. So logic does still help us shape this as new details emerge. So the joy of inductive reasoning. Part 3.
Part 3 is a bandit counts as an unavoidable accident.
And do part 4 as well.
A lion or a bear or a leopard or a panther or a serpent counts as an unavoidable accident.
All right. So this is basically saying, I don't expect the shepherd to be going up against a lion. I don't expect the shepherd to be going up against bandit, some guy with a sword. I got a stick, he has a bow and arrow. He's getting the sheep. That's the way of the world. However, before we all start just saying, oh, well, good, so a lion shows up, I'm off the hook, the Mishnah asks, wait, what circumstances are we dealing with here?
Yeah, when is this so?
Right.
When they come of themselves, the lion or the bear. But if he took the flock to a place of wild animals or bandits, they do not count as an unavoidable accident.
If you take your flock into the worst part of the hills where the lion is known to live, and the lion eats the sheep, duh, right? What kind of shepherd are you? Exactly. That's not what I would call unavoidable. As we often say to our kids, You know, when they say, well, I didn't mean to, I said, yeah, but you didn't mean not to, right? You weren't trying to avoid it either. That there's a little proactive requirement here, that you were not neglectful in where you chose to wander with these flocks. If you take the sheep into a place that's known to have bandits, and trust me, that's something that all the people would be talking about, and the bandits show up, you're on the hook. Even though generally, if you're in a place that's considered safe, if the bandits show up, you're not. If you move into danger, you put yourself at liability, not just at physical risk.
So is there a way to make this relevant to today?
Absolutely. Let's go back to our valet idea. So let's say that the valet parks the car in a nice, secure place, right? And there's no reason that anything should be stolen. He's done everything that's right. It's locked and everything. And someone comes, they're able to break in and take it. That's the bandit situation in an unexpected place. He'd be actually okay. He would not be on the hook for that. On the other hand, if he takes and he parks it on the street in a really bad neighborhood, and someone breaks into the car, takes it and steals it, absolutely he's on the hook, because that's not where you're supposed to park cars. Right? That's a place where cars get stolen. You don't park the car there.
We call that contributory negligence.
Excellent phrase. It sounds almost Aramaic. Contributory negligence, and I think that fits as a very nice description. Exactly. You are being negligent because you're contributing to the underlying situation that led to the actual problem, and it could have been avoided, and you didn't avoid it. Therefore, you've done. All right. Mishnah 10 is going to continue with this idea. So we're on the next page, but we're going to deal with the more the animal itself rather than these outside forces acting on it.
If a beast died a natural death, this counts as an unavoidable accident for which the hire or paid guardian is not liable.
Okay, so I've got, you know, I'm taking care of your sheep, and one of the sheep has a heart attack and just boom, falls over dead. Sorry, man, your sheep had a heart attack. I don't know sheep CPR.
Yeah.
I'm not a vet. It just happened. Even though I'm the shepherd and I was paid to watch your flock, it's an unavoidable accident that I am not responsible for. However, notice who is still responsible for this. Right? We know the unpaid guardian is not. He just has to take an oath. We now know the paid guardian and the renter are not. Who's left?
The owner.
The hirer?
The borrower.
Oh, the borrower. Oh.
If I borrow your horse and your horse dies a natural death, I'm responsible for giving you a new horse or paying you the value of that horse before it was dead. Right? That's when you borrow from someone else, you assume 100% liability, even for things that are beyond your control. Right? Borrowing is a big deal. Right? When you're holding on to someone else's property, you have to treat it better than you treat your own, especially when you're the borrower.
You started this morning's class with a Shakespeare quote. I'll give you another one. Neither a borrower nor a lender be.
Yes, yes.
That makes perfect
It was
sense.
Polonius, right?
Yes.
Yes, from Hamlet. So neither a borrower nor a lender be. It's not bad advice when you're talking about the Mishnah. We're going to get to a way to sort of walk that back in a minute, but let's go ahead and finish on these details, because you know the old saying where they say the devil's in the details? God is in the details, right? It's you find God by looking at the details more than you find the devil, if it's such a thing even existed.
But if he tortured it and it died, it does not count as an unavoidable accident, and the hirer and paid guardian would be liable.
That horse, like half to death while you're riding it, and it falls over dead. Yeah, I don't care that you rented it, so you're not normally responsible for a natural death. You're responsible now, because you were doing things that that were exacerbating the condition of the animal. Right? If you decide that you want to take the word literally, torture the animal, and lo and behold, it dies, you can't go and say, but I didn't actually kill it. I just caused it great excruciating pain. No, you are responsible for this.
Well, unavoidable accident, I mean, that's avoidable. You could have not.
Right.
You could have not tortured the beast. Exactly right. But it's trying to say that the definition of natural death may still be met, that it still died just a natural death, even though you were contributing. Exactly. A more common, whipping is one thing, but horses, you can often run a horse to death. Horses are amazing beasts and incredibly resilient and devoted, and they will give you everything. And if you run a horse too hard and too long, it will literally die under you. And it will die of natural causes, right? Its heart gives out. But it was only running that long and having its heart have that trouble because you forced it to. So it's a natural death, but you're still on the hook.
Would you have to prove the torture part? In other words, whoever the veterinarian sees the dog, the horse died
Yes.
of natural death, but he really didn't know about the torture. So somebody has to establish the fact that it was torture.
And that would be the responsibility of the court to investigate. And their discussions and their questions to the witness or the actual litigants would involve those kinds of questions. What were you doing with the animal before it died? Can you describe its condition before it died? You know, how, were you doing X? Were you doing Y? They didn't actually usually ask yes, no questions. They would ask broader questions to try and catch people out in the statements they made. Because if you say, were you torturing the animal? I think they're going to be able to guess the right answer for that.
What were you
But what were you doing? How did the animal look? Did you notice anything in its eyes? You know, what were you taking care of it? Oh, I'm sorry. What did you say you were doing with the animal again? The other sections of the Mishnah and the Gemara, they go into great detail of how you try to question people in ways that will force them to expose lies in order to catch them, so that you can get to the actual truth. It was much more vigorous than our current system, and also, no offense to a modern American system, but much fairer, because the questions were coming by a Beit Din, a group of judges, and they weren't being put by adversarial lawyers. And so the judges only had one interest, which was finding out what actually happened.
We did that here too.
Sometimes, yes, with like magistrate courts and other things.
No, that we studied it.
Oh, we studied that, yes. We studied that part back in Sanhedrin, yes. And in American legal systems, we have had magistrate systems which are similar, where you don't have an adversarial legal system of lawyers that are each with an axe to grind. You know, one wants their litigant to get this and one wants their litigant to get that, and neither one of them have as their primary purpose truth. It sometimes goes to the best lawyer rather than the most accurate version. But who am I to criticize? All I know is Mishnah.
Well, what if he swears he didn't torture the animal?
So at the end, that would be required, right? So at the end, if they have no evidence to believe that he tortured the animal or prove that he tortured the animal, he would still have to swear. And by taking an oath before God, and with all that implies, he would then be believed. Okay, he really swears, and you know what? If he's lying, God will take care of him a lot more than the cost of a horse. And that is between him and God. And so at the very end, if there was no other way to establish it, an oath would be used to clear him or convict him, depending upon whether he was honest or lying. But that would be happening on the spiritual level. And we do sometimes have to admit the limitations of the earthly court.
If the beast went to the top of a crag and it fell down and died, this is an unavoidable accident.
And go ahead and read C.
If it was led up to the top of a crag and it fell down and died, this does not count as an unavoidable accident.
All right. So what's the difference between the two cases?
One, it went up by itself. Two, the paid guardian took it up to a dangerous area.
Exactly. So go back to the sheep example. You know, you look up as your shepherd and you see a sheep going up the cliff. And you're like, ah, stupid sheep. By the way, sheep historically were not as stupid as they are now. We've bred them to be dumber than they used to be. Wild sheep and natural strains of sheep are quite resilient because, you know, they live for a few million years without humans. They took care of themselves just fine. So sheep goes up the crag and you're still cursing this stupid sheep and it falls off. you're not responsible for that, right? I can't be there for every sheep constantly to keep them from doing something that ridiculous that you wouldn't expect it to do. On the other hand, if I think there's a shortcut between this pasture and going up the hill, and it's up a narrow, windy path, and one of the sheep falls off the path and dies, now I'm on the hook. Now I'm liable because I'm the one who took it up there. Make sense? Of course it does. Got to remember the original author.
An unpaid guardian may make a stipulation that he will be exempt from taking an oath. And a borrower may make a stipulation that he will be exempt from making restitution. And a paid guardian and a hirer may make a stipulation that they will be exempt from taking an oath and from making restitution.
All right, so as we've talked about, sometimes there's oaths, sometimes you're making a payment, sometimes you're making a payment even for ridiculous circumstances that you all looked at me like, why would a poor borrower be on the hook for a horse dying from a natural condition we had no, cause? And the rabbis noticed that too. And they said, if you make a stipulation, if you tell the owner, you know what, I'm going to borrow your horse, but we need to be okay with this, that if this thing dies of a natural condition, the horse, that's okay, as long as the owner agrees. Right? So if the owner says, yes, I absolve you of any responsibility should it die from natural causes, then you're okay. You're off the hook. And likewise, if I'm a shepherd and I say, I would like to make a stipulation before I take your sheep up into the high pasture that should one of them be killed by a wolf or should one of them be killed by 2 dogs or whatever, I'm not going to have to pay you back for the loss of these animals. The owner of the flock can say, yes.
And once he does it now become customary and then it changes the rules?
Only for that. That's a stipulation. It doesn't become a new custom. It just is the stipulation between
Even
them.
if everyone's doing that stipulation?
For that stipulation, yes, as we're going to see in the next Mishnah, there is a limit to how far you can push things that are contrary to Torah responsibilities. So in this particular case, for a single binding agreement, you're okay. And that word agreement is really, really important. Yeah, the owner has to say, yes, if you take my sheep up into the high country and one of them is killed by a wolf, which remember was supposed to be a shepherd's ability to stop, I will not hold you responsible for that. Then he won't be held responsible for that. On the other hand, if the owner says, what are you talking about? What kind of shepherd are you? I expect you to defend my sheep against a wolf. The Mishnah says you can do it. You can do it. If the shepherd takes the sheep up, he's responsible. And if the shepherd doesn't want to be responsible, don't take the sheep.
Is the agreement made in the presence of witnesses?
Yes.
Or do they write it down?
Both. Ideally both, but verbal testimony would be sufficient. So if they make a stipulation in the marketplace, hey, I need 2 guys. We're going to make a deal about the sheep. So I'm taking them up, but we're making an agreement here that if one of them gets killed by a wolf, I'm not responsible, or maybe the first 2 sheep dead by wolves are not my responsibility. They can make whatever stipulations they want. As long as both sides agree and people have witnessed it, that's good. And then if they come back and one of them tries to break the agreement and they end up in court, the witnesses would be brought into court and they'd say, what did he say? What did he say? Did they agree to this? Did they agree to that? And the truth will out, hopefully. All right, moving along quite nicely, but confusingly to Mishnah 11.
If one makes a stipulation contrary to that which is written in the Torah, the stipulation is void.
Okay. We're not going to go into this in too much detail because the Talmud has a lot of trouble reconciling this sentence with what we just said, right? Because the last sentence we just said in Mishnah 10 was you can make a stipulation that says a borrower's off the hook. That seems against the Torah, right? Because the Torah says the borrower is on the hook. So it's a long and confusing discussion about how do we reconcile these two things. So we're going to move on because really there's no way to get into it without just breaking open the Talmud and going through its discussion. Suffice it to say there are different opinions of how this can be reconciled with each other. Either they're dealing with different cases, dealing with different types of stipulations, but we were not going to go through all the different permutations. we'll move on to part 2.
Any stipulation that mentions first the action is void.
All right. This, you're not going to get a better example unless you, except for the footnotes. The footnotes are great. So you go down into section 2, and it gives it, for instance, behold, you are betrothed to me on the condition that my father will agree. Right? I said the action, you are betrothed first, and then I said the condition, if my father agrees. If you put the action first and the condition second, the condition is null, the action counts, the action stands. So if I say you are betrothed to me if it rains tomorrow and tomorrow it's sunny, you're still betrothed to me, right?
Because it's stated as fact.
Exactly right. The if came after the statement of action. That's not the way to make a stipulation. If you want to make a stipulation, you put the big conditional at front, and then you say what happens under that condition. And it really is a quite nice grammatical clarification, right? That if it rains tomorrow, then you will be betrothed to me. Right now, there's no possibility for any confusion, and it's not as though I got interested in accepting your initial statement and then had the rug pulled out from under me when you threw a condition at the end of the sentence, right? You're starting with the condition. Now I'm prepared for when you get to the actual act. Yes.
That sounds like a distinction that would be made in a law school. How is the common person supposed to know that?
They study Mishnah.
Really?
Right, yes. I mean, this would be common knowledge in a community that use this.
The ordinary shepherd would.
Should, yes. I mean, because this is something that you would learn from your parents. This is something you would learn from the community in the marketplace. You know, when two merchants were haggling over something and they were trying to reach an agreement, and one said, if, da-da-da-da, or the other one said, well, tomorrow, I said, da-da-da-da. Condition first, right? Tell me the if before you tell me what, right? That would be the normal language of commerce. It's important to remember that before the modern world, where we have bits of paper to protect us, it was all about how you spoke to other people, what you said, and how you presented yourself within the commercial world, which was everybody's world. Right? We didn't leave that just for bankers and finance and corporations. The commercial world was me, my neighbor, and everybody I bought anything from that I needed to live. There was no such thing as a supermarket where I'd walk in and everything was neatly labeled, and I'd go to the scanner and beep, 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 and I'd put a card in the machine and never have to have human interaction. It was all human interaction, and that meant you needed clarity of the words for the human interaction, because that was all you got. And when it came time to have an argument, it all came back to who said what to whom and when. So you learned that words mattered more than paper. I think I shared that story, yes, with this group about my great professor, Rabbi Dorf, whose father was a contractor. And he went with his dad in the truck to the lumber yard or the supply yard. And he went to the manager, and he was giving him a list of what he needed. You know, as in, 500 feet of this and 400 sacks of that and all of this, and huge order. And they came to terms on the price. They shook hands, and they got back in the truck and drove off. And little Dorf, before he became Rabbi Dorf, turned to his father and said, but aren't we going to sign anything? Isn't there like an agreement or a contract or something? He's like, what happens if he cheats? And he said, in this business, your word is your bond. And if you cheat someone, no one will do any business with you. Cheats me, what good is a piece of paper going to do me? Right? I'm not going to get the supplies I need to finish the job that I need, and I'll be in trouble. So I have to trust him, and he has to trust me. And it works. Yeah, we've become overly fond of paper rather than actual trust and good human relations. Part 3.
Any stipulation that can, in the end, be fulfilled and was laid down as a condition from the beginning, such a condition is valid.
All right. So this is the stipulation of if it rains tomorrow, that's an okay stipulation. If I learn to fly tomorrow, I could learn to fly. If I grow wings tomorrow, that's not a valid stipulation. right? That is, you are just said nonsense. So the stipulation has to be something that is possible, not just imaginary or fanciful. So stipulations matter. So you say, you know, if I see my wife tomorrow and your wife, God forbid, had already passed away, then you're just cheating the person by making that stipulation. And that's really kind of where the big worry was here. It wasn't about whether I grow wings, but the big worry was, if I make a stipulation that sounds plausible to you, but I know it's impossible, then I am essentially cheating you into thinking it's possible, and that's taking advantage of you. Trying to be scheming. Let me come up with an example. If my daughter gets married, or if my daughter engagement goes well tomorrow, then I'll buy that lovely coffee set for her wedding present. Right? Now, what's wrong with that? Imagine I don't have a daughter. Right? So it's impossible for that condition to be said. But I've now delayed you from selling that coffee set. And maybe in the meantime, I can run and get some extra money, and you're missing out on a different sale. Or reasons that I might be somehow manipulating you by conditions that are false, that are impossible, but they work to my advantage in the meantime. So I know we're not all scheming and plotting enough to come up with other examples, or at least I'm not. But that's one of the reasons that the rabbis were worried about these sorts of imaginary stipulations. Make sense? Makes sense. And that is the end of chapter 7. And looking at our clock, we're going to have to call it there. Chapter 8 is going to continue with the idea of borrowing things from other people. It's going to introduce the idea that the Torah talks about of, if you have borrowed something, but the owner is with you and something happens, who's responsible, right? So let's say I'm borrowing your car and you're in the passenger seat and we get into an accident. Normally, if I'm borrowing your car and we get into an accident, I'm 100% responsible for it. But if the owner's with you, so you have to come back next week. Or you can read ahead of the Mishnah. That's up to you.